Can you talk a little bit about the view of transhistory?
Yeah. We'll talk about it more today. Definitely, that's a big part of today. So I will talk about it. Yeah, thanks. Maybe, so we'll wait a minute and then... It's kind of a funny name, isn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
There's a lot of terms, so it's good that these are straight translations. That's a pretty straight translation from the Tibetan, which would be a straight translation from the Sanskrit. And so a lot of times these things don't carry over too well into English. But when you explain it, then it makes sense. It's what's interesting about these ideas is that we don't have the language for it. It's a little bit like if we took physics and take it to Nepal, and then try to fit physics into the language. They don't think of the world in that way. So a lot of this is all of the Buddhist presentation is about a worldview, isn't it? I mean, it's about a view, worldview, how one sees things. And that actually can change over time, like the view that the world is flat. That's changed over time. I guess before it was flat and now it's not, because people see it differently. It's possible, isn't it? So that's the problem. So you think of it that way, like a lot of times, like you take physics, quantum physics, and try and put it into different languages. I'm sure it's a big problem. So I will explain it more. So let's start. It's about 5 after. Is that right? 5 after? Okay, so again, just to remind you to make sure you just review. Some people weren't here on the first day, so what we did on the first day that I felt was important was to have everybody write down something that really gets you. So the title of the class is Working with Difficult Emotions, and if it's not tangible, it's just theoretical, right? And of course, one of my weaknesses, or one of the things I like is I like theory, because without theory, it's hard to make sense of. You need the education before you can do the application. And so, I really wanted people to think about what is something. I mean, we all have something that or maybe one thing that over years and years you just keep, it gets you. It might be as a parent, that you just can't stay calm when your daughter or son is out past curfew, or you just don't stay calm when they don't listen to you at dinner. They're like when they're smaller or something and they're acting out or being kind of rambunctious, and that anger comes up. I don't know if it happens to you, but it did a little bit once. I think once for me. It's joking. That or the certain kind of person that you work with, or a certain situation that comes up, and you tell yourself hundreds of times that you shouldn't act like that. Or a relative. I have a relative that I've tried for years. It's better. No, I gotta say it's improved in my attitude. Which I think the relationship's improved, but probably all that's improved really. The relationship was always probably okay. It's just my reaction to it, right? So when you need something tangible, I'd really appreciate it, because this is not designed as a theoretical class. We can do those too. Right? I'll never do a pure theoretical class. So I shouldn't say never. I think last year we did the 3 trainings here, which is a technical but even that we tried to make practical, I think. Was anyone there? Do you remember? I don't think so. Maybe you were there, but not remembering doesn't mean you weren't there.
That's true.
I'm not sure I was there either. No, I'm just joking. Okay. So really try to feel a sense that, and for those, again, to remind you that I really have as I stated in the beginning, it's sort of my mission, infected in me by Lama Yeshe, that all these teachings, all these ideas should be for the purpose of improving our psychology, improving our mental health. So even the most obscure, arcane, or profound theories on interdependence and emptiness and Buddhist psychology and the four schools and all that stuff should only really, it's all really designed to improve our quality of being. That's so important. But like everyone, and also a lot of times in sort of, say, American culture, we're very academic based. That's how we're trained. Hopefully that's changing a little bit in our schools, right? But so Buddhist psychology, Buddhist ideas are very attractive in that way because you can get really lost in the theory and academia of it. It's very academic. It's not very faith-oriented. So not being heavily faith-oriented allows for a strong logical, it has a very strong logical foundation. Everything should be analyzed and logically, not proven, but provable. Even the rituals, even all this stuff. Okay? It should have a basis. One should approach it in the sense that, okay, I can see how these things, these rituals make sense on a psychological level. Somehow I understand it. If you understand correctly, one thing is, okay, let's take these water bowls. I don't know if you can see them. The water bowls. And it's like, what the heck is that? Is it just decoration? Which it's not. Okay, someone did those water bowls, right? Did you? Earth did. So, it wasn't that you were just like looking to do some decoration, were you? No. So we have to have, now, someone out of pure faith, and probably people do, a lot of them, come and do water bowl offerings. And it's not a bad thing, because it's better than, I don't know, that kind of faith is maybe okay. Better than what would they be doing at home, maybe. Anyway, the point is that whether it's good or bad, it depends on the mind. So doing water bowl offerings is not inherently good and not inherently bad. It isn't anything until you make it something, or we make it something. So really the water bowl offering ritual, and we've got many rituals, I just chose that one, always has had a psychological inspiration behind it. Something that helps someone's mental health. And maybe a lot of people's. Maybe a ritual is something that's maybe a little more universal. Like let's say we all have it's easy to have a tendency of pride, let's say. That's pretty easy. People, like let's say, and so you think about if you know what prostrations are. So that's a psychological method. It's pretty humbling to prostrate to something. But just prostrating, of course, is not necessarily, it doesn't mean it's good. It has to do with this attitude that the person understands that the problem is the ego. And that's, when you start talking about the view of the transitory, then these things begin to make sense. Because you begin to understand what is the problem here. So when we talk about difficult emotions, getting pissed off with your boss or your coworker or that customer, this is true story. When there's one place I spend time, in fact, in the book I give credit to this coffee shop I go to in SoCal, in Santa Cruz. And I always get half decaf. It's one of those bottomless cup places, right? So they know I get half decaf, half regular, because I can stay longer. If I get all decaf, I get too amped out, So I have to. And then one day the girl, it's about a week or two ago, she said, "Oh, would you like the decaf first, or would you like the caffeine first?" Meaning, she had both pots. Yeah. Which one do you want me to pour in first? Half decaf or half calf? And she kind of giggled, and I said, and I don't know what I said, but she said, "Yeah, a customer had just gotten angry at her." True. For putting in I don't know which one, the decaf first before the calf. What was the point of that story? I had to find a reason to tell it. Point of view. I think it was about point of view, right? Anything. So that's the thing about the idea of when we understand that what is the problem to our disturbing emotions? What is the cause? We've talked about that a little bit. Okay, we identified them. I can't go through all that stuff again. But the main thing is to be familiar that we have to come at it from a different point of view. That the mind is essentially unhealthy from a healthy point of view. Okay, so that's something that is very interesting. When you talk about what is baseline health, then the Buddhist psychologists are looking a lot more at potential. And everything else is not so good. Okay? It's like, it's the same as when we were talking about last week about the dogs. Okay, the dog. You know, although you answered in the other way, but I asked how many people would want to be their pet? You still want to be?
I'm not saying anything.
I know. People learn. That's why people are pretty quiet around here. But you think about, okay, you want to be, let's don't even take your pet. If you think about, how many other people would you really want to be, actually? People. I don't know. There's not many that I would rather be than myself. Okay? That sort of shows that, number one, things are pretty good, but also, number two, things can be pretty bad. Okay? So, in juxtaposition or in comparison to that, we're healthy, in one way of saying it. In comparison to a chipmunk, we're healthier. We have control. But in comparison, if you think of the Dalai Lama looking at us, we must look like looking at the chipmunks. And he's just like, come on, don't you get it? Like telling a chipmunk, come on, read this book, it'll really help you. Can't. That's what the Dalai Lama's telling us, and then we're like telling the chipmunk, here, this book will really make you happier. You read this book, or watch this video. Well, what is it? What the blink? Yeah. You tell your dog to watch it. Will it watch it? It can't, maybe a few seconds. Okay, so I think that's what we're like.
Should they watch it?
No, I'm talking metaphorically. Yeah, they should watch it.
It's all nature, right?
Yeah, no, but my point is, we're the same way. We're exactly the same. We're not that different from the dog being able to watch what the blink. Okay, when we sit and watch a profound something, a teaching or an idea, do we incorporate it? We kind of doze off. Our mind wanders. We think, oh, that's 20 minutes? It's an hour. I thought it was only 20 minutes. I thought it was like a TED Talk. Right? And then you see it's an hour, and you go, okay. And then even now you kind of, oh, it's interesting, I'll sit through the hour. But how much change happens? Honestly, I don't think very much change. It's not that it's negative, but, why not just change that? So you read about this, about let's just say the quality of compassion. Quality of compassion. Or the quality of generosity. We see beautiful videos on YouTube and on Facebook, and you see about people who are very generous, but then we don't do the same thing. We see it's so good, but why don't we do the same? That's because we're like not that different than the chipmunk. We're driven. Remember we talked about last week? We're under the control. We're not in control. Okay, that's very, very important. Human potential is to have control. An animal doesn't have that potential. It really doesn't, supposedly. If you watch, you can't find, it's hard to find any example where an animal was taught how to have control. There's a couple videos of orangutans that learn sign language. And we think it's so fantastic. If that's all we learned was a little bit of sign language, we wouldn't say it's fantastic about a person, would you? We don't think it, depending on their whatever disability, of course, but I'm trying to say is, just in a general sense, that's not a huge accomplishment. But we've seen an orangutan that can learn 200 words. Wow, that's really smart. If that's the level of control that all we get, that's not much. Okay? So the beauty of the human being is that we have this huge potential. That's the beauty. That's the difference between us and an animal. Animal, in a sense, has the potential. It does, they say it has that potential, but the ability to access it is just so remote. Because it has a mind, it has the potential. But it's tough to figure out for them to have the ability, capability. Okay, so you got that idea about your own problem, okay? So I really want that clear, that you got something that comes up for you. Okay, and then we're just going to run through these because I did it last week. So these are the 6 things. So what I'm going to talk about this week is try to give you an idea about what to do. So I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't help. Talk a little bit about what do you do. This is all knowledge. Now, one thing to understand in Buddhist psychology and the Buddhist therapeutic approach is understanding something is part of the remedy. It's very important to get that. It is very important to have the right understanding, and it does have a powerful effect on the problem itself. For example, we talk about so 6 things that cause, so that relationship you have with your cousin Mildred. She comes over and don't get along, or she always calls you, or whatever the thing is, really irritates. I'm making this up, I'm sure, but okay, and you get like tense and your heart gets tight, or the person comes in your office, or the customer you have to deal with, or a student you might be teaching, right, or a teacher you might be learning from. Okay, so to understand this is not exactly found in modern psychology. This is something unique to Buddhist psychology in the way it's presented. What this is, remember we talked about, it's about having an imprint. So if, let's say Urs and I don't get along. We didn't get along from the moment we met. And I say, it's because German accent. Is German or Swiss? Swiss German. But you're from Switzerland originally. I don't want to say German if you're Swiss German. So it's a Swiss accent. The Swiss accent, German accent is really bad, isn't it? It's really irritating. It is, yeah. That's what we say. He can handle. So, you see what I'm saying? So we'll say, but actually, to begin with, so let's say I get really agitated every time I hear a German accent. This is a good example. Use your own example for this. So the first thing is I have an imprint in my consciousness. People in Germany don't feel, or Switzerland don't have, right? They don't go, oh, how irritating is the German accent. They don't have that imprint. If you don't have the imprint, you can't have the experience. That imprint is mental. Let's be very clear. This is a mental phenomena. It's not physical. Okay? Whenever something comes up, problem or not problem, the fundamental cause is that imprint. Isn't that weird? So, Doug likes chocolate cake and I don't like chocolate cake. Why? Same chocolate cake. First thing is imprint. And I can go in, there's more detail. It's the beauty of Buddhist psychology, the detail that we can go into about this imprint thing. Okay? It's not sort of the purpose of this class, but in the misleading mind we talked about consciousness, remember? Consciousness, an organ, sense organ, and the object. So that chocolate cake, do you like chocolate cake?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay. So I don't really like, it's okay, but I don't like that much. So that chocolate cake, we put 2 pieces in front of us, right? Same chocolate cake, and we have different experience. But we don't relate to the world that way. Well, I'll talk about it a lot tonight, just to bring back your question. What does it mean, the view of the transitory? The view of the transitory is that chocolate cake, actually, most of it exists within us. Because when you look at perception, you have 3 things that are happening. And again, this is not of this nature, not the purview of this class, but just to go in. I don't have the slide up there even, but I have a slide that shows you have to have a consciousness, a mind. So you got the chocolate cake there. But you don't have anything until you have a mind there. Okay? And you need an organ. Well, in this case, it's the taste organ, it's the eye organ also, the sight organ and the taste organ, right? You still don't have anything. Because you need an object. You need a piece of cake. Now you have an experience. Now, if it was just raw, now what happens there is not just raw, right? Something else also goes on where Doug goes, oh, wow, it tastes good. He doesn't have to even taste it. He just sees it. And he starts like salivating, right? Or tasting it. And then why? Because of the imprint. He's had a lot of chocolate cake that every time we have an experience, which is about 1/100th of an instant, That's an instant. 1/100th of that is a mental experience. So there's 100 mental experiences in that instant. And every one of those 100 mental experiences have a lot of things going on besides what I just talked about. It also has a feeling of sensation. So you're having a sensation of agreeable. See, the chocolate is an agreeable sensation or a pleasant sensation. And it's happening so fast. Why? Because of his previous experience. He ate chocolate cake and said, "Oh, this is good." That was the final kind of result. Hundreds of thousands of instances later, right? Lots of these experiences. And then at the end of the piece, there's a lot of them going on, right? And by the time he finishes that first piece of cake he ever had, right? He's had a lot of those feelings. In his case, agreeable or pleasant. What did that do? That left all of those 100 mental experiences per instant has left an imprint on the consciousness. He's doomed next time you put a chocolate cake in front of him. You have no choice because it shows up and you think you're really having a new piece of chocolate cake. One way it's new and one way it's old, right? Because you're just responding to almost all of it becomes projection. And you're eating your projection. Not totally, but 99.9%. So this is not what I was going to talk about tonight. But that gives you a sense of imprint, okay? Yeah. I'm going through these 6 again because I thought we kind of went through them quickly last time, but maybe not. Imprints are of 3 kinds. So when Doug and I are facing that piece of chocolate cake, let's go back to that. There's only 3 kinds of imprints. What they call virtuous, which I like to think of as helpful. Non-virtuous, which is not helpful. And then neutral. Now what that means is very subtle. Okay? And later in tonight's talk, we'll talk about sometimes a category, and one way of talking about them is there's 10 virtuous actions or 10 non-virtuous. Okay? One of the things with the cake, just remind, we'll get to that. So there's a way to go about something that creates a non-virtuous mental imprint. And non-virtuous mental imprints ripen as pain. Isn't that weird? So when you're having that argument with your cousin Mildred, right? There's already an imprint. Somehow there was an imprint. I don't want to go into detail, but there's some experience, imprint on the consciousness where probably, and so you get in an argument, automatically she irritates you. That irritating you is a non happy experience, right? It's a disturbing emotion. So that was caused by some sort of disturbing action, disturbing mental state. Maybe you yelled at her. Maybe you yelled at someone else. Who knows? Way back in 1983, you had a fight. Called her a bad name. Who knows? We can't say it. Zillions of things. When I'm driving over Highway 17 and then I get irritated with the person next to me, that would be a negative imprint because it's generated through a negative mental state. I'm irritated, right? I don't experience the result of that then. Okay, that's one of the things about these imprints. They're definitely going to arise some point. They even get magnified because all of a sudden that mental imprint of being irritated with that guy who's tailgating me, might manifest as, well, next time someone tailgates me, I'm going to block their way. I'm going to get, and you get into a big fight, and this thing goes on for 20 miles, and then someone gets killed or whatever, right? That's how it gets magnified. Almost always gets magnified. But if you didn't create the cause, you won't experience the result. That's why I remember the story about the girl the airplane that got hit by lightning last week, and all 250 people died except for one girl who fell 2 miles and lived. She didn't have the imprint, okay? She didn't have the cause, which means imprint. And they're never lost. That's the bad news. And good news too. But you don't experience, the thing people say instant karma? It's not true. Almost never. It has to be a huge, heavy thing to experience karma instantly or quickly, to experience your imprints. So everything we're experiencing, like when you get, sick from that chocolate cake, that cause is not the chocolate cake. And let's say you really were grasping at it. And then, like my brother, when he was in India, was so hungry. He went to this monastery all day, and they didn't. Somewhere on this trip, and they didn't feed him or something. I don't know. And he came back to his hotel, and in the hotel they had a bowl of cashews, and he just gobbled them down. And now he goes, if there's even the smell of cashews, he goes into anaphylactic shock.
Wow.
Just the smell.
Really?
Yeah. He has to be so careful. He goes to Indian restaurants and says, "Is there any cashews?" No. But if there are cashews, like someone's even in the kitchen, around the rice, how there's some rice has that. But you think, the cause of that was him, eating all those somehow, eating those cashews while on an empty stomach. That's not the cause. That's the condition. Weird, isn't it? Okay. So the second one was misleading social conditions, in fact, bad friends, okay? And we had old Mr. White up there from... okay, bad, misleading social condition, right? Okay, that's just, you're in the wrong place. You're in a negative... If you're in a bar, it's very hard not to drink. That's usually the one I think of, okay? So to be an alcoholic is due to a mental imprint, okay? And you reinforce it, okay? Due to a mental imprint, then you hang around people who drink. Okay, that's how it works. So that helps that negative. So like when I get angry at this person, this relative, then all their relatives say, yeah, she is annoying, isn't she? Yeah, she is always doing that. Oh yeah, she is a busybody, right? Think about it. And you go to other people to tell you. Like, don't you think the German accent really is like... Oh, yeah, I know. How many people here think the German accent is like... No. He's turning red. Okay? Okay, that's how it works for us. And then your disturbing emotion increases. Okay, it gets more validated. Okay? It's basically lifestyle. And it's interesting because 1 hour can agitate your mind for days. That's pretty powerful. 1 hour going into that situation. Hanging around with those people. Okay. Then, this is the third one. Unhelpful explanations. That's like bad teachings, okay? Let's face it. That's what it's about. Bad instruction. I was watching something on last night. Did anybody watch Vice News? Vice, V-I-C-E. I think it's all internet news. But I have 3 kids, and my youngest son is 23, and he's very, like many kids that age, are sort of activist, sort of oriented. We watch Vice sometime. It's like 60 minutes. Yeah, but it's different edge. And so he wanted to watch. So we watched the first one. There's like 2 seasons of it last night, and it was on. It was really powerful. It was on the madrasas, that are training the in Pakistan train. I mean, they're not all. They're basically Islamic schools, but many of them are covers and used for training terrorists or indoctrinating them into this way of thinking, which is completely false. And they get these kids who are uneducated and turning them into suicide bombers. So I can't remember the number, but it was something like in Pakistan last year there were 123 suicide bombers, and something ridiculous, like 90 were kids. I mean, it was really a lot. It was most of them. And so they caught a few of the kids before they were doing it, and they interviewing them, and it was all about that they were told that they wouldn't be killed because the bomb would go out away from them when they detonated. And that even if they did, it didn't matter. First of all, that they would live. And secondly, that whole thing about going to paradise, which is not in the Quran anyway. It's amazing. But these are false teachings. That's an extreme example. Okay? A more example closer to my reality is, fortunately I was a Buddhist psychologist before I became a psychologist or a psychotherapist, in that I was in Nepal for almost 14 years. Then I came back and got my degree. And, and it's not with bad intention, but a lot of the instruction that I received as a psychotherapist was not helpful, and yet it's taught as helpful. I just have to say, it's just wrong ideas. And, it's maybe helpful on a very temporary level, and the tensions are good, but it's not helpful for people. It generally can lead to more confusion. Okay? That's just a simple example. Okay, but this is happening all the time. Any kind of fundamentalist teaching probably can fall into this. They had down there, increases superstition. So the Buddhist approach is it's quite dramatic. People will say that, isn't this good or isn't that good? But if you're really analyze, so everything is analyzed. Everything's logic-based. But based on what logic does it decrease a person's misunderstanding of reality or increase their misunderstanding of reality, ultimately? Temporarily, of course. Sometimes there's temporary, you need to give a person a hug. That might increase their sense of superstition, misunderstanding reality. But ultimately, all the really, truly evolved beings that I've met are constantly focused on this thing. You might go to them with something that's hard for you. You might be depressed. They don't just make you feel better. You might not feel better at all. You might feel worse after talking to them. Because they'll talk to you in a way that only is helping you to cut through your long-term misunderstanding of reality. So if you say, I'm so depressed because, my wife, and I know exactly, my wife is leaving me. She doesn't want to be married anymore. In Western psychotherapy, it's like, oh, really? Wow. Talk about that. Tell me. So you talk about it. A lot of psychotherapy, you talk about what happens, it makes it more solid. Yeah, you should be angry at her. She shouldn't do that. She's wrong, you're not wrong. That's so garbage from a Buddhist psychological point of view. If you have the imprint, if you don't have the imprint, you don't experience the result. It doesn't mean the conditions aren't there. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be a nice person, all those things. But in that case of, let's say my wife is leaving me, which she's not, fortunately. But if she were, wrong information, false teaching is, yeah, she's really selfish, isn't she? See, now, a Buddhist master psychologist won't say that. She might be selfish. But that's not the cause. Isn't that weird? That's tough. It's kind of tough love. Really tough. Why? Because you want to be free. You're depressed. I'm depressed because she's leaving. You want to be free of that or not? Long term or not? Short term, okay, yeah, she's selfish. You're a good guy. You'll find somebody else. Okay, and that doesn't relieve anything other than that temporary pain, which is not. Oh, it's okay. But that's not what we need to be focused on. Okay, if we can. If that's all we can focus on, then that's our that's our capability. Do that. So if the bottom line is, let's get to this, is this thing about wisdom. The diagnosis, all the diagnoses come down to one thing: misunderstanding reality. That's it. So if my wife is leaving me, and I'm talking to one of my teachers, his only focus is, and it's not, by the way, this is not logical or conscious, it's not contrived. It's natural for him. He can only react in a way that's going to help me understand reality. And probably he's going to use my wife leaving me in my depression to make me face myself. Well, not probably, definitely. What is it? And using that as an opportunity to develop wisdom. That's what we're going to get to in a few minutes or in a little while. That's pretty amazing. So with discriminating wisdom, you can do anything. Really. I mean, just about. Okay? The other, what is number 4? Habit. You keep doing it. You keep talking about Mildred as being selfish and insensitive and busybody and boring or whatever it is. Guess what? Mildred's going to become more of that. And then you meet someone who's kind of a little bit like Mildred, and then she becomes that too. And every time you meet, I had a colleague. He once said to me, when we were in training, we were sort of asked, well, okay, what are your hot buttons for like clients? What kind of client don't you like? And he said, I'm not going to say, but he said this particular stereotype. If you say that stereotype, you can't even see the person, can you? You just see your projection. That's what habit is. That's what it'll do. And the only way you can confront it is you have to confront that it's a mental projection. And the mental projection is a habit. Okay? And all habits are projections, and everything is projection. But there's good projections, there's bad projections. Okay? It's very important. They're good projections too. If you know they're projections, that's what that discriminating wisdom thing is. You can do anything. By the way, you only do good things. There's some sort of connection there. For the most part. I mean, there could be an exception. Okay? Clear? We've got to get to today's stuff. So and the 5th one is mistaken conceptualizations. That's actually, this is important for today. In fact, we're always conceptualizing mistakenly, ultimately speaking. But they have different gradations. Okay? So one way to think of this is this idea of exaggeration and minimization. We talked briefly about it last week, right? Just introduced it. So you can see how we do both of those all the time. I don't know, she's so selfish, Mildred again, right? Or that person irritates you. It's exaggerated. It becomes because you project, and then we constantly elaborate on the projection, okay? That's the human mind. I'm not talking about this is a nice idea. This is the human mind. It will always do this. It'll exaggerate that chocolate cake. And then you can do minimizing too, where it's almost like denial. You just don't see the qualities at all. And that's we can see that in friends of ours. We do it too. Okay, where for example, that thing about getting run off the road, or someone tailgating you, and then you turn around and tailgate him. There's a minimizing that goes on there. It's exaggerating too, of course. But the minimizing is, it doesn't really matter. No, it's not. If someone says to you, and you're like a really good Buddhist and good person, they say, you shouldn't do that. I mean, this is really negative what you're doing. I say, oh, no, it's okay. He did it to me, I'm just doing it to him. That kind of. But also in our view, we minimize. Okay, we minimize things in our project. Just in the same way we exaggerate things in our view. Wow, he's the nicest guy. I met this guy. God, he is such a... Right? That's exaggerated. We do the same thing with minimizing. Okay? Minimizing a person's qualities. Okay? And that's happening all the time. So with the problem, those disturbing emotions we're talking about, these are the 6 conditions that get them to rise. One of the things is if you really look at the one you wrote down or you think about, this will be happening. You're probably exaggerating the qualities of the person if you're having a problem with that person. Qualities means characteristics. It's interesting with Urs's accent, for example. It's so grating. Isn't that exaggerating? It's nothing. It's just atoms, isn't it? And then every time I say it now, for Urs, everyone's done out to the habit. Did you see what I'm saying? That's exaggerated, right? Okay. Now the three views, this is where we get into the important stuff for today. There are many, okay, the fundamental cause of all of our problems. If anyone wants to bring up a problem, I wish you would bring up examples, because we can do this. Yeah? You have an oh, good. Okay, give me an example. So, hang on to it for just a second. So, every single problem, difficulty, pain, suffering, really only has one cause. Just remember this. This is the foundation of Buddhist approach, Buddhist psychology. The cause, I've said this a number of times, is misunderstanding. It's misperceiving reality. Okay. And that's our main focus tonight. Now, the way we misperceive reality, so this is just a little technical thing for you for a second. As I said, this is the fundamental teaching of the Buddha as a psychologist, that we misperceive reality. Now, what is so then the antidote would be seeing reality. So if all my problems come from not seeing things as they are, the antidote would be seeing things as they are. Okay, it's not that simple, of course. If it were, we'd all be enlightened, all be awakened. Okay. But people, all human beings, are at different capacities, right? And different levels of ability. And so what you have here is that the Buddha, what he did in helping people understand what is reality, he explained it at in four different levels of difficulty. Okay? So in a way, we should become familiar with the first level first. In some Buddhist schools, these are called the four philosophical schools. And the rest I was going to get technical for just about 2 minutes, and that's all. Those four philosophical schools, the first one says, okay, we get it. What Buddha said reality is this. And it's quite extensive. It's not that simple, right? But they have many texts written in commentary to and they'll use Buddha's words and say, see, when he said this, he meant this. So that's fine. Then there's another school that goes, oh no, well, that's fine, but really what his meaning was this. And then there's a third and a fourth. Okay? Now, even those schools have many sub-schools in them. Many of them don't exist anymore. Okay? So I just want to say that we could be talking about... Now, so when I present something like this might incorporate a couple of the different schools' way of explaining. And then even the way I explain, they'll all say, for example, so now let's get back to simple, not just technical talk, okay? So, when we see it, anyone remember the definition of reality? You wrote it down twice last week.
Seeing things as they truly exist.
Seeing things, that's not how I said it though.
I know I said it differently.
Yeah, that's right. She said, seeing things as they truly exist, but?
See things as they appear.
No.
As they are.
As they appear, as they exist.
Right. Things exist the way they... Things appear the way they exist. Or things exist the way they appear. Not that simple. Take a little further. Okay? The way this cup appears to you is not the way it exists. Boom. That's the problem. If it appears to you the way it truly exists, that is perception of reality. Make sense? This is not easy stuff. I know it might sound easy. For example, turn it around. So the way that appears is not the way it really exists. No, it appears. So how does it appear? Okay, I'm going to tell you. There's a couple of things that are right there. This appears to you and me. When I say you, I'm always meaning me also. This appears to you as permanent. There's nothing permanent about this cup and this tea. Nothing. But yet we all are seeing it as permanent. Now you probably don't even know that you do that. What does he mean? If this is the first time you're hearing it, and if not, even not the first time, well, you never thought of that before you hear it here, or heard it in a Buddhist context. But this is the problem. When we are, right now, everything you're seeing, I'm seeing, we're seeing as permanent. Now what does permanent mean? Permanent has a definition, like everything in Buddhist logic and Buddhist philosophy has definition. I'm not going to give you I'll give you the definition, but I'll give you the easier one first, not the actual. So the meaning of permanent is something that does not change moment to moment. It's really interesting. The definition of impermanent, you would think, is something that changes moment to moment. It's not actually the actual definition, but it's a good one. The actual definition is much harder for us Westerners, or us modern people. The definition of impermanent is something that's produced. Have you ever thought that if something's produced, it just happens to be changing moment to moment? We don't make that connection until if you think about it. You have to think about it. If something is produced, it has to be in a state of change. When I say moment to moment, I mean all the time. Not this moment and then the next moment. That's what's called gross impermanence. We're talking about subtle impermanence. Subtle impermanence is that something is in a constant state of change. If it's going to change, it has to be changing now. It must have the characteristic of change. Otherwise, it can't change. So that pillar, this building, is not going to exist, 50 years from now, right? And we say, I see. That Karuna guy was right. The building was impermanent. And that's not what we mean. What we mean is for this building to not exist in 50 years, it's changing right now. If it's not changing now, it will be here in 50 years. Okay? And from a physics point of view, if something is produced, it's impermanent. Okay? Why does it matter? Anyone know why this matters? Because none of us are seeing it that way. It's a simple fact it's like a fact of life, but none of us see it. That's because we don't see reality. If we saw reality, we would see it. And because we don't see reality, we see unreality. And you know what happens then? Oh, I love this tea. This permanent tea. Always will make me happy. The chocolate cake. But it's in a state of change. And then we get tricked. And we go and take a sip and it's cold. What? Why don't you give me a thermos cup, by the way? Then I'd be happy, because then it'd be like permanent. Think of the emotion that we're talking about, the thing you struggle with. Someone give me an example. Urs's accent. When Urs speaks with that German accent, it's appearing to, if you're irritated by it, which I know you're not, it appears permanent to you, not impermanent. Let's take another example. That difficult customer that always comes in you have to deal with. Okay? Or client. Or the relative. That person is appearing to you as permanent. Why? Do you know how that's... Look at it this way. There's two things that are impermanent in that whole interaction. Well, there's actually three things. One thing is the person. They're changing moment to moment. Rapidly, a million miles an hour, they're in a state of change. Number one. Or the object, whatever, the object, let's say the object. Okay, so maybe it's, like I really like ers, it's just this accent irritates me. So the object then is the sound wave, right? Sound waves, right? Not him. Sound wave. Okay? Those, it appears when it hits my ears, it appears to my ears as something fixed, permanent, static. Okay, so that's one mistake. It's not. Okay, it's moving a million miles an hour. The other thing that's moving a million miles an hour is my mind. My mind's impermanent also. So, the sound waves that come out of his mouth and the sound waves that I hear in my ear, not even and then I say that irritates me, it's gone. But we fix things. That's because we don't see. That's what is that process? It's called ignorance. That's the foundation of all the problems. If you saw your cousin Mildred, we get irritated. Just the phone rings and you see the caller ID. Oh no, it's her. God. Calling from Michigan. Right? It's the only one I know that has whatever area code that is. And I recognize the number. That thing doesn't even... The moment the phone starts to ring and you look at it, it's already changed. It's not the same thing. In fact, most of that is just atomic material, isn't it? Right? The number, the sound, it's all just atoms. The sound of the phone, you look at the number, but you don't, when I say you, I mean me also, we don't see that. We say, oh no, because you see it fixed. Solid. Unchanging. Intellectually, oh yeah, I know it changes, but we can't do that. This mind of ours that's confused freezes things. Okay, do you got that? It really gets to be annoying after a while too, because you don't want to do it. But that is a remedy. Now, so that's one of the misconceptions of reality. Misperception of misconception of reality is not the right way to put it, is it? It's a misconception producing unreality. Okay? So that's one way to look at how problems arise. And that's not even the deepest one. Now, this is perceptual. It's not just intellectual. This is actually perceptual. And when we train the mind, we train it ultimately, maybe we can't do it in the beginning, we're working towards seeing reality. So we're working towards seeing impermanence. Again, seeing impermanence is not the deepest reality, by the way, deepest experience of reality. But it's a pretty good start. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Dalai Lama, this is just my belief, but I mean, it seems that they prove it to me all the time. They actually see the world that way. Okay? So imagine if you saw everything. So now, instead of seeing things as solid, they're much more like smoke or liquid or fluid. I mean, isn't this pillar really fluid, actually? Isn't it much more fluid than what we see? Let's put it that way.
Is that like a hologram? So
Like a hologram.
even a holographic universe?
Yes. I think it's I think it's similar because, for example, they say that now the universe, I think they're talking about this, whatever they're talking about, this local universe, because universe is something, it's kind of confusing. It's kind of infinite, isn't it? But the thing about local universe, if you sucked all the space out and took just the matter, if you can't do it, but if you could, they say all the matter in the universe, do you know how big it would be? Anyone know? Huh? I did tell you, and you didn't remember that either. These are the worst students. 9 foot cube.
No.
That's physics. I'm not talking about the Buddhists. That's from a physics point of view. Maybe they're wrong, but someone's saying it right now. That means that pillar is gazillions more of space than it is of solid. It must be almost entirely space. And that's about 9, well, that's probably of that 9-foot cube, that's probably, I don't know, what? 2% of a 9-foot cube, right? I don't know how much that matters. Probably just a tiny little bit, not even 2.
Yeah.
If you took all the solid matter out of it, it's probably about like that. No, it ain't even that big. It must be just a few atoms. So few atoms, why can't we walk through it then? This is so fascinating when I read this. I had heard that you could walk, that these high meditators, when they see reality, and by the way, when you see reality, it doesn't mean you're enlightened. That's fascinating. But it does mean you will become enlightened. Because what they do is they cultivate that view of reality over either a very long time or, but it's not just instant satori, enlightenment. Enlightenment's not instant like that. It's cultivated. But if you see once you see reality, you're a different being than the rest of us. For then on, forever. And they say at the very first level, now that being who sees reality through his her meditation, by the way, mind training, still has 10 levels to go through before he or she becomes a Buddha, which is completely with no problems anymore. But once that person enters that first level, they're guaranteed. There's no more problems in a way. It's just a matter of practicing and purifying and taking time, to apply all that. That person, the very first, I read this in probably 1978 or something. One of the distinguishing qualities that you get, so you get all these different qualities at each of the different 10 levels. Well, the very first level, you're able to walk through walls. It says that. And I thought, okay, that's pretty cool. It says in this Buddhist text you can walk through walls. Now I understand it. It makes sense. Of course you could walk through walls.
Unless you have too much chocolate cake.
If you had too much chocolate cake, you might get stuck.
Right.
My feeling is at that point you're not eating much. Well, you're right, eating chocolate. Lama Yeshe used to eat chocolate cake. He loved it. And Lama Yeshe probably could walk through walls. I'm sure. Theoretically, he could. I never saw him. But he did do things that made you think, oh, he can do that. Okay, well, what are we? So, that's one thing. We see the impermanent as permanent. Oh, remember what else we do? I'm really upset with you, right? I can't stand that. I'm not picking up the phone. Why didn't you wash the dishes? I'm really irritated you didn't wash this. That I also is that person is impermanent too. But we don't hold ourselves as impermanent. We hold ourselves as permanent. Even if intellectually we get it, we walk around as a solid guy or girl. We'll talk about that. I'll just go through these 3 views. So suffering is seen as happiness. That chocolate cake, we see it, happiness. We see all of this as as a means to happiness. And if what we don't see as happiness, we see as something to get away from. It's basically the same thing. But we don't understand, and I'm sorry to make these blanket statements. It doesn't mean it necessarily applies to each one of you. But in general, we don't understand even what suffering is. Suffering does not mean the pain in your knees. That means a kind of suffering. But that's not what we're talking. Suffering is seeing that we see things incorrectly. So let's use this tea as an example. This tea, I would go towards this tea because, I know it sounds simplistic, but I see it as happiness. I see it as something that's going to make me feel better and happier. I see it that way. Forget about the fact that it has a nice taste. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how we approach it. And we're doing it all the time. Let's say we want to have a break. When I say break, you're approaching that break as something that's... But that break is in the nature of suffering. That's intense. This tea is in the nature of suffering, but I see it as something pretty good. Why is it in the nature of suffering? Because it doesn't exist the way it appears. It's just clear and simple. How it really exists is I'm going to make some mental imprints when I go into this cup of tea. And those mental imprints, I have no idea if they're good or bad because I don't even think about it. When I say good or bad, I mean, I don't know if those imprints produce happiness or sadness. I'm not thinking about that. Right? I'm just reacting. Is that clear? Because, okay, let's put it this way. We go through everything as if it's happiness. And what we're missing is this in the nature of suffering. If this cup of tea is in the nature of happiness, which I am hypnotized by and believe it is, then what happens if I keep drinking the tea? Okay, I feel more satisfied. So then Tish brings me another cup, because it's happiness, right? What happens if I drink another cup? Third cup, fourth cup. No one's going to drink 4 cups. Well, unless it's Tibetan tea, you do drink a lot. But, did you follow me? It turns into suffering, doesn't it?
Yes.
You get bloated, it keeps you awake at night. You can't even face another cup. Chocolate cake, right? If the chocolate, we come at that chocolate. This is what's important. Not to focus too much on the chocolate cake. It's more our attitude. Come towards that chocolate. It's, wow, this is nice cake. I love chocolate cake. And we come at it as happiness. If it's in the nature of happiness, you should be able to eat 3 or 4 or 5, 6 slices. But what does it do? Makes you sick. That, in a way, I know it sounds simplistic, that proves it's in the nature of suffering. Or let's put it this way. It proves it's not in the nature of happiness. If it's happiness, it should always make you happy. But it doesn't, it turns to suffering. Sleep is the same thing. That's always a good one because people always say, oh, sleep, I love to sleep. Just, I can do that forever. Really? Try it? And what happens?
I never have a life.
You never have a life. What if you had total permission to sleep as long, I'm not talking about ability. You have permission. You have permission to sleep as long as you want.
Yeah, I do that.
Okay, on Sunday, at what time will you wake up?
1:30.
1:30. And then what happens if you try to go back to sleep?
I
Can't. What happens if you did go back to sleep again? You're forced to because it's happiness, right? So you would want to, right? Why don't you? I know you're smart.
I'm satiated in my sleep.
Satiated, and then what does it turn into?
Heaviness.
Yeah. Unconscious of heaviness. Then you get even depressed. Take any pleasure far enough. So isn't that proof? Is that not enough proof to say the object alone is not that great? The object is actually neutral, by the way, isn't it? But we invest in it as this is happiness.
But why do you always have it taken to the extreme? And what about in moderation?
It's in moderation because in moderation implies that it's in the nature of suffering. Because why do you have to do it in moderation? It's like we're trying to balance this. Okay, not enough, I'm not happy. Too much, I'm not happy. Right? So we have some middle way. Middle way, and it's like, well, where is it? Which point? And then we're in the nature of suffering too. Why? Because in a way, all we're doing with the pleasure, if you don't have the pleasure, what happens? If you don't get the sleep, what happens? So the pleasure of going to sleep, or the pleasure of moderation, a piece of cake, seems to be, we have this, it's a really negative way of looking at it, I agree, but it's like we're in this state of unhappiness, discomfort, constant discomfort. Oh, I have a piece of cake, that gives me a little comfort. Wow, that's sad. That's what life comes down to. Just constantly blocking the suffering that's there already. If the suffering's not there, don't eat the cake. Don't sleep. What will happen? What will happen?
sleep wouldn't be too good.
Okay, well, let's say don't have the pleasure. The pleasure, in a way, is interrupting the natural way of being, which is not very comfortable. Our bodies are not comfortable. That's why I keep sitting down. I'm relieving the sun. It's in the nature of sun, so I got to sit down. The back starts hurting. Legs get tired. Right? Otherwise, to stay how we are. Don't eat. What is eating anyway? It's the temporary relieving of suffering. If you think about it. Sorry to make it so bad. I mean, we all like to eat, but
Yeah, but then everybody eats.
everyone's in suffering. That's what Buddha taught. It's not easy. Yeah. Everybody eats, meaning we're not in control. Discomfort's going to come. We better eat to relieve the discomfort. Correct? Good.
A lot.
Thank you. We should think. It's not just, but it's really interesting. If you do nothing, if you're like me, if you just do nothing, how long can someone do nothing? I want to know.
1 minute.
Well, then how about you guys? Anybody else? How long can you do nothing? Come on, give me some 20 minutes. It's not very long, really, is it? Then we get bored. Then we get agitated. It doesn't come from anywhere because it's almost like this comes from inside. Well, not almost. It does. Why? If we're not in a state of discomfort, why don't we just stay comfortable? This is a different way of looking at the world, and this is the Buddhist way. It's not very, it's not very pleasant. You know what I mean? But it's raw, and it's in your face, I think it's what I call true. Now, it's not for everybody, for sure. I'm not going to tell this stuff to my mom. It's not fair. She doesn't have anything to replace it with, right? I mean, she doesn't. She's 93 anyway and has Alzheimer's. But yeah, and I do think that people can change. I never give up on that thing about people can't change. I think that's a really unhelpful myth. Neuroscience proves anyway that we can change. Our brain is changing anyway. But that's another story. Okay, so and last one. So I know these are new. It's really, I feel very honored that you let me share these with you. I don't necessarily think that okay, I accept that. Just think about it. That's all. That's the main thing. We have to think about things. The last one, not truly there as seen as not truly there. The not truly there as seen as truly there. Okay. Sometimes that's called. We see the impure as pure. Don't worry too much. This is pretty advanced, but when I say the not truly there is seen as truly there, that is when I told you those 4 schools, that's the highest school. One way that we see this, so we see this as it's true, like everything we're seeing right now we believe is truly there, meaning it exists in the way it appears. And it doesn't exist the way it appears. You know one other way it doesn't exist? I'll give you another one besides impermanent. And suffering. Everything appears as, how do I say this? I want to make it really simple. Everything has parts. What's the opposite of parts? I think it's unitary. We see everything as unitary, like single. We don't see the parts in things. Even my relationship with you right now is made up of parts, but I don't see it that way. That's the ultimate way of seeing things. Lama Zopa, Dalai Lama, those kind of they do see the parts that are happening in this experience. It's called interdependence. They see the interdependence. I see all of you out there. But let's talk about this parts thing for a second. One way that it's a multitude of parts is there's an object, let's say, and then there's an organ, sense organ. Let's say the eye. You could use the ear too, in terms of my voice, the air conditioner. But eye is we're familiar with it. So I'm looking at your black shirt, right? And there has to be an object, your black shirt, the color. For the eye sees colors and shapes. That's its function. colors and shapes. Of course, the Buddhists define all the different kinds, how many colors there are and how many shapes there are. I think there's 12 shapes. I got a little less obsessive compulsive as I got older. I couldn't remember these things, but so black, right? So there has to be there has to be an object, right? There has to be an eye organ or a sense organ. In this case, eye organ. Then there has to be a consciousness, what we call the eye consciousness, EYE, consciousness. Okay. There's 6 consciousnesses that correspond to the 6 senses. 5 physical sense, and then what we call the mental sense. Okay. So there's 3 things happening actually. If there's no black shirt, do I see a black shirt? If there's no object, do I see a black shirt? No. I can imagine one, but that's not the black shirt. Okay. Then, if there's no eye organ, do I see the black shirt? No. Do blind people see black shirts? They don't. They might hear them, smell them, feel them, taste them, imagine them, but they don't see them because they don't have the eye organ. If that's where the disability is. Disability could also be in the eye consciousness. If I don't have an eye consciousness, do I see the black shirt? So I got a black shirt, I got an eye, do I see the black shirt? No, you need a consciousness. You need a mind. We say brain, but we don't say the same thing. So that's a process, right? That color, black, or green, or white, where's the color? First of all, I'll tell you where you see where you think the color is. If you're like me, I think the color is in his shirt. Right? The black's there.
Some people would say black is the absence of color.
But there's still an object.
Yep.
Are we okay to say, otherwise I have to use your orange blouse? Can we use John, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, John's black shirt, and we accept its color. It's an object. We're seeing it, right? Okay, thank you. Sorry. I was going somewhere with this. So where's the color?
It's in your eye.
In your
Eye.
It's in your eye. So the color is in the eye, but not in the shirt. Correct? Okay. First of all, I just read this. I think I shared this last time or sometime. I just read recently from a scientist that I never knew that molecules have no color. And you go down to the smallest particle, it doesn't have color. So where is the color? So even for physicists, color is not in the shirt.
Wow.
Pretty mind-blowing. We make the color. I guess from physicists, we make the color based upon the waves and how they're organized, and we organize them into a color. Pretty amazing. I got to read more on it. I'm really fascinated, but that's about all I know about it. Now, if it's in the eye, if the color is in the eye, in theory, we should be able to dissect the eye and find the black, right? I don't think we can, right? We assume that you can't probably find it in there. So the black might be some sort of mental, so it might be on the consciousness, not on the eye organ, not on the shirt, but it must be in the mind. How many of us see color that way? Oops. Sound, you do?
Uh-huh.
Oh, good.
And that's because I'm an eye specialist and what you usually process it.
Darn, where's the color for your eye specialist?
Well, for my type of specialty, the color is organized more in the brain.
In the brain, that's fine. Brain, I'm going to use brain and mind the same.
Well,
it's not in the eye organ, huh? Okay.
No.
And it's not in the shirt, right? Okay. Yeah, brain, mind, we can talk about that later. We're not in that same thing. We're not in that discussion right now. So, how many of you, besides you, but when you go through your world, when you're in direct perception, like right now, don't you see this green here? It's when you think about it, But I mean, do you have the experience? It's a mental experience? No, it doesn't matter. I won't put you on the spot. But generally speaking, this is a mental experience. But we see it out there, right? It's actually, what it is this experience of the green shirt, black shirt, is a series of interdependent events. It's made up of parts. Part in the mind, part in the eye, part in the object, part in many other things. Like, for example, light. That's a part. If light was on, I couldn't see the black shirt. How many of us see all those parts? I'm sorry. If you're like me, you don't see any of them. We say, oh, that objective, out there, external, permanent, solid, concrete, black shirt over there. And that's what we do with Mildred. And that's what we do with the coworker. That's what we do with the chocolate cake. And it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist that way. It appears to us as truly there, and it doesn't exist that way. And the deepest way that it's not there is this process of interdependence, it's called. That's also called dependent arising. That black shirt is a process of dependently arising within my mind, and honestly, and I hope I'm the only one that has this problem, but I don't see that. Lama Zopa sees that. He perceptually sees it. Dalai Lama sees it. Any advanced meditator sees that process. And so, what point do I get really attached and I want a black t-shirt like that? Or I want that Tesla. If you have that kind of perception, where's the Tesla? How do you find it? It's all moving and parts and... You see what I'm saying? This is very important. And it's not just theoretical, it's perceptual. We don't see it that way, we see that Tesla. So of course, if you see it as concrete, solid, self-existent from its side, of course you want it. If you see it as this interplay of mental cognition, you kind of go, whoa, wait, which is the Tesla I want? Actually, you don't say it that way because you're very clear. You see it that's reality. You see reality. When you see reality, the problems stop arising because who's gonna crave for a Tesla? And then when you go into the Tesla showroom and they say, well, we're sold out on orders for 18 months, would you like, you get, but I wanted it now. But when you see it as all this mental fabrication and this complete separation from what's really there, you're not going to get upset. You're probably not going to go in the showroom either. But that's another point. Okay? Are we good? Yes. Oh, I didn't break. Do you need a break?
Yeah, I was pointing to the...
Oh, okay, 5-minute break. I won't try to end early because I never do. Okay, where did that? Okay, so the root of the problem is we see that which isn't there and don't see what is there. That's simple formula. There is no Eiffel Tower there, but we see it as there. Right? It's a metaphor. Okay, people have seen these before, and that's it's just a drawing on the sidewalk is all that is. There's no 3 dimensions to it. Is that how you say it? No 3 dimensions? Or... Is that right?
That's right.
But that's how we see the world, like that. We don't see what is there, and we do see what isn't there. Okay? We don't see what is there. Impermanence, for example. We don't see things changing, but we do see what isn't there. Permanence, unchanging, fixed. That's an example. You already did this? Okay, see around there at the bottom? View of the transitory's eye. We see, so this is where, okay. So all the problems start from seeing things incorrectly. We see, and that, don't worry about the first bullet, but the independent. We see things existing independently. The black shirt is seen over there as something existing independently. with a little logic, like we talked about before the break, we can see that actually that shirt is not over there. It's not over there in an independent way. But all of this talk, these ideas that we're talking about, it's really, really important. It doesn't work unless you spend a lot of hours, really a lot of hours, meditating or contemplating how we see things incorrectly. Don't try to see this dependent thing first. See first how, Lama Yeshe said, it's good enough to see how you misperceive the world. That's good enough. Well, if you misperceive the world, if you see how you're misperceiving the world, it's not a very big step to perceiving it correctly. Okay? So it's very important to first go, yes, I get it. I see how I see John's shirt independently. I see how I see this glass of water independently. I see how I see, go back to that problem you were discussing, that you wrote down. It involves an object. I always get irritated when I see smog. Climate change makes me really, really upset. Or the fact no one's doing anything about it. It's no different than what we're talking about. It's the same. It's all the same. Climate change and those people, they don't exist the way they appear. That's kind of a bummer because we want to be self-righteous and justified for getting angry and upset. Doesn't mean you don't do something, by the way. That's different. But you do it without the disturbing emotions. Now you do it with a compassion or one of the positive emotions. There's positive and there's negative emotions. We're talking about the negative emotions. Even with the positive emotions, you still might not see it correctly. Okay, but it helps. So, the primary wrong view another way of talking about the wrong view that we have, this thing, the view of the transitory as I. Okay. What that means is, a living being is sometimes put into 5 different parts. Not they're independent, the 5 parts. The body is one part. Okay, so if you talk about yourself as a living being, you have a body. Well, 2 parts always. Body and mind. Okay, a living being, all living beings have a body and a mind. All of them. Or they're not a living being. I mean sentient living. It's said that plants are not sentient beings. They might be living, but they have no mind. So if you cut down a tree, in theory, or a plant, you didn't kill anything because there's no mind in there experiencing and having to leave that tree and take rebirth somewhere else. So sometimes they say, well, they're living things, but they're not sentient. They have no consciousness. They have no mind. I use living beings to mean all sentient beings. It's probably not 100%. I think sentient sounds weird amongst us. It's not a very common word, right? So when I say living beings, I don't mean plants. Okay? I mean sentient beings. So body and mind. Okay? And so the chocolate cake isn't what we do with, the view of the transitory as I means that on my body or on my mind, I see me. I say me. Now the mind, they divide, in this case, into 4 other parts, which is the feelings. So, feeling of good and bad, or pleasurable and unpleasurable. Discriminations, like you discern, this function of the mind that sees that as a tape recorder or audio recorder. I discern that as audio recorder and not as a camera. Okay, or I can discern you sitting there as opposed to you sitting there. I can see yourself. So that's so it's 3 now: body, feelings, discerning, and then all the emotions. So not only do you see you 2 sitting there, but oh, I like your shirt, but that shirt doesn't, that kind of thing. Those are, or I get a reaction like I get upset because I don't have your shirt. All that. Those are what's called the everything else group. It's really, technically that's what it's called, the group of everything else. And the fifth one is just the consciousness, the mind itself, which is clear. Okay? Clear and cognizing. But you don't just have a mind. Mind is just clear. In deep mental training, you can just rest within the clear quality of that mind. But generally speaking, that it also is going to be discerning things. So that clarity sees the yellow cup. And it sees the yellow cup. It can kind of just. But then there's discernment that the cup is over there. Then there's so the body part. I'll go backwards. So the view of the transitory is that my body perceives. It's the body that perceives the yellow cup, right? The eye organ. I'm not talking about all that other stuff right now, but it's the body. So that cup is mine. For me to say that cup is mine, then the eye grasps onto that cup. The eye. Mine. Why? Because I like it. Like is a feeling. When I get a pleasurable, and I discern the cup, then it stimulates all these emotions. I like it, and also the mind has perceived it clearly. Okay, consciousness clear, but it doesn't make all these judgments. It's not too important. This gets, again, too technical. But my point is, all those five, I'll say me. So, like, for example, this gets really easy now. So we have one part as the body. You stub your toe. Ow! My toe hurts. My. When it says I here, you can you can shift that to my. Same thing. My toe hurts. Right? Isn't that what we say? Okay. Oh, that shot hurt. It hurt me. I hurt. Right? You always get an I out of there. So the feeling comes up. The feeling of pain. That's a feeling. Oh, I hurt. Oh, I don't like that. Right? So the I is put onto these things. You get it? Or when that person calls. Okay? Oh, I can't stand her. That's put onto that one of those other groups. The one that hears the phone, not that one. Because that would be, oh, I hate that phone. Right? Oh, that number. You can project onto the number. But it's that one where it stimulates some feeling, and the feeling generates a memory, and then an opinion. Oh, I don't like her. That's what it means. So that I sticks to everything. It just sticks all the time. And it's not true how it comes up. Why would we say, I'm tired, for example? I like chocolate cake. So you got chocolate cake, right? We'll take a physical thing. There's chocolate cake. I like chocolate cake. But what happens in the myth of all that, the ignorance of it is like you're merged with the chocolate cake. But really you're two, right? So if you say, I like chocolate cake, at what point, where's the I that likes chocolate cake, first of all? Second of all, you're separate. So how can you like it? Or I'm upset. Maybe that's an easier one. I'm tired. I'm hungry. To see hunger, you have to be separate from it, right? There's object and subject. The object is hunger, right? But we don't see it like that. We say, I'm hungry. So the I sticks onto the sensation. But it can't be the sensation or else it couldn't see it, right? Hand can't see itself. A mirror can't see itself. That has to be subject-object. When you say you're tired, isn't there a subject and object? I'm tired? The sensation of sleepiness or whatever. Correct or no? So that implies you're separate from the sleep. You get it? Is this too weird? So then, if you're separate from the sleep, then you're not sleeping. That pillar is separate from that pillar. It's not that pillar. But this is ignorance at work, by the way. Why we don't do that is because ignorance goes, I am tired. Okay? And not only does that, it says it, now can you get this idea? We were talking about permanent before and impermanent? Or independent? It's seeing it as permanent too. It doesn't see the moving quality or the tiredness. Everything's moving. Almost everything is impermanent, by the way. There's just a few permanents. And they're not that important at the moment. Okay? So that's ignorance. I'm so tired. I love chocolate cake. I hate my boss. So it's not only that the boss is seeing, where's the boss, first of all? Where's the thing? When you say I hate my boss, it's because some image is coming to you and it gives you a bad sensation, right? Based upon your opinion, based upon your past. So there's an opinion and it pops up and you go, I hate my boss. Well, actually, you actually hate the opinion probably, or the feeling. But even then, you're separate from it. But ignorance tells us we're the same. It's impossible to be different and the same. Things are either different or they're the same. You can't be both. And that's just one of those logical things you work with. So you see how this is how now we get into how constantly we're misperceiving things. And that's what makes those difficult emotions arise. If I saw it correctly, I wouldn't get upset. It's impossible. What would I be getting upset? It's like being at one of those David Copperfield things. And you know he's making an illusion, and maybe he doesn't do this, but maybe making an illusion of a cat, and then he kills the cat. You're not going to get upset if you know it's an illusion, right? It's all just fabrication. Not getting upset. Not in the way like he killed the cat. Or like he makes the Statue of Liberty disappear. You know it didn't disappear. You're going to get upset. You might be fascinated. I think that's how Lama Zopa is. He's fascinated by everything. If everything becomes like that illusory quality, how fascinating would that be? Doesn't mean it's not there. Their Statue of Liberty is there, some way. But it's there in an illusory way, not in the way we see it. Okay? The glass of water is here, something here, just not the way I'm seeing it and feeling it. It's cold. I asked for cold, that was good. Good. Sensation. I love this cold water. I like it. Where's that I? Where's that I? If the I is sensation, no, first of all, now here's the deal. Okay, this is really important. If I call out your name, someone calls your name, you go, oh, right? You're the only one that goes like that. Oh, he's talking to me, right? Just imagine, if I say Doug, no one else goes, oh, he's talking to me. You have something come up, right? Like John, you have something come up, but no one else has that come up right now. Urs, I said Urs, right? Get some sense of, oh, he's talking to me. Or that me comes up. Do you understand? So imagine now that, okay, now if I ask you, what are you doing right now? What do you say? Listen, I'm listening. That I get a real strong sense of, that I feels permanent, solid, independent. All those things I talked about before. Those three things. It feels permanent and it feels independent. Okay? This is very, very, very important. That permanent, independent I, which is your identity, does not exist. Wow. And that's what we spend all our life for. You know, when we talk about being upset, those things you are about your difficult emotion, listen, that emotion that you wrote down, disturbing emotion or difficult emotion, what's the one constant in it? All of us have one constant. Like someone might say stress. Someone might say, oh, my thing on work, I get really angry with, rude customers. Another person might have said, I lose it with my kids. Right? Another person might have said, my husband drives me nuts. I don't love him anymore. Okay? What's the one constant in all those?
Me.
I. A sense of self. Whether you call it me or I, those are just names. But what we're talking about is that sense of self, and that sense of self is concrete and permanent, but doesn't exist that way. Impossible. If it was permanent, so this is very, very, very important. When you leave here, if you do any kind of contemplation or meditation, mind training, try to see how that appears to you. It's very. I'm giving you the cliff notes. I'm going to tell you right now. It'll appear to you as permanent, and it'll appear to you as unchanged. Well, it's permanent, unchanging, permanent, and it'll appear to you as independent. It doesn't. It thinks it's independent of that feeling of sleepiness. Is it independent? It's not. It's dependent. If something's dependent, it's not independent, right? This is so amazing. It appears to you and me as independent. I am standing here talking, feeling independent. I am here. And there's no I that exists that way. And because I am hypnotized by that I existing that way, all the difficult emotions arise, all the problems arise, everything arises that's not good. And good. Actually, good arises from that too. Not enlightened, though. Does this make sense? Yes. Am I giving you a headache?
No. But I'm confused.
But you're getting a headache.
I'm confused in the sense that...
Yes.
Because you said, I'm tired.
Yes.
I like chocolate cake.
Yes.
You can't know itself.
Right.
And it's separate, and yet it's there's no self there, and yet it isn't self.
There's no self there the way it's appearing.
Right.
There's someone, I mean, there's a Doug,
Yeah.
I'm not you, you're not me. But the way, go ahead.
But the other thing is it can't know itself.
Right, it can't know itself. Good question. How do we know?
It's also not separate, right?
Okay, so that sense of self, correct, by the way, yes, you're right. This is something that seems really complicated, but in a way, from the psychological point of view, it's not that complicated. Okay, so there's a sense of self, I, like I'm sitting here. Or I'm standing here. There's that I that if we really looked at, when I say I'm standing here, and I did a quick jump and I look at, okay, who is that? I would see that I mean something permanent, independent, and fixed. That doesn't exist. It all the time says it exists. All the time. I'm up here doing this, I'm doing that. Right? It's all the time like tricking me into thinking it's really there. It's like the Wizard of Oz. And Toto, he goes behind the curtain and sees the little guy with his feet don't even touch the ground. We have that quality. We do have that ability. That's called another part of the mind. So the mind has many functions. And there's one function that's like, can discriminate like that. Okay? When we develop it really strong, it's the wisdom function of the mind. Okay? And it can look at that I, it can look at all that process. But when it's looking at it, it doesn't say, oh, I'm looking at it. It doesn't have that. It's a wise quality. When I say wise, it sounds like something Pollyannish, but it's wisdom itself. So we have in our mind many, many different mental factors, just like we have jealousy, right? Or just like we have anger. We talked about. And you can see, like anger is different mental quality than attachment. Well, there's good ones too. There's very highly, highly functioning ones. Very highly functioning. Those are the ones we access and then do this, use in this process of mind training. So that's a really good question, because I haven't been talking about the good stuff. Now, the problem is, because these other ones, those disturbing emotions, are so active, the other ones are dormant. Not all the time, but generally they're not very developed. Okay? Maybe Einstein had part of those really developed for some reason. Meditators, mind trainers, there's many ways to develop them, and we have to develop them. So that's... Compassion is another one. Very dormant. Love, very dormant. The real love. Does that answer your question?
Well, I think it might... I get it. It's just that it's...
Complicated.
The hard part is seeing it.
That's right. So, so in this process, there's 3 steps there's the education of it, which is what we call listening, but it means education. Reading, listening, study. Then the second step is contemplating it, which is what you and I are kind of doing right now. You're trying to contemplate it. Third one is meditation, which doesn't mean what most people think is meditation. It means making your mind familiar with it, which means having an insight. Now, contemplation, you can develop the insight. You can go, I get it. I mean, you really see it. Now, I'm not talking about intellectually, maybe conceptually a little bit, right? I see it. I mean, it will be conceptual. The meditation part is when you nurture that. But you can have many insights, but because our minds are untrained, we can't hold it. Okay, and that's the sad thing, and that's also a sad thing in terms of modern psychotherapy. I think in psychotherapy sometimes people definitely get insights. Walking in nature, we get insights, or going to retreats, or falling in love with somebody, or having a child. There's some intense insight when you're with a baby that's born. It's like, but we don't have the mental capacity to hold. We don't have much focus. We don't have deep attention, and we don't have deep focus. And they're also not deep awareness. So we have to put those three together. That's how those meditators, that's why they evolve so quickly. Because they can take an insight and they can stay focused on for hours on them.
Karuna?
Yeah.
On your meditation part, as opposed to the contemplating
Yes.
part, you're not talking about like analytical meditation.
Also analytical meditation is misunderstood by most of us.
Mm-hmm.
Analytical meditation, definitely. The part that I think people may misunderstand is you merge single point of concentration with analytical meditation. So that's what I was referring to with Doug. Now, if you don't have analytical meditation, you're probably not going to have a very deep understanding of impermanence, for example, or a very deep understanding of, the view of the transitory. You get that actually through analytical meditation. But you use a single point of concentration to hold the insight into it. And you stop analyzing.
Okay.
But, there's been stories of debaters in the Tibetan tradition who attained realization of emptiness. Lama Yeshe, I don't think he attained, some say he attained realization of emptiness in the debate yard. That's some intense analytical meditation. But you have to have the single point. Whether he attained insight into reality or not, let's say he did, he still needed to go back to his room and do the single point of concentration on that insight and reality. Okay? Yeah, just having the insight is not enough. You got to then put this single point of concentration thing with it. So those are the two things we look to develop in the meditation state. Okay? And contemplation looks a lot like analytical meditation. That's deep contemplation, but contemplation can also be really thinking about things, doing debate, in a general sense. I think that's my opinion.
Okay.
That help? That make any? Yeah.
Yeah, I think just asking it helps. Just, talking about it a little bit, it seems like a paradox.
It is a paradox. You know why I love this thing? I mean, I actually do. This is my passion, Buddhist thing, because of this. It's not like I have the answers. I'm just sharing with you what I asked that question, 40 years ago or whatever, right? And then since then, I've been wrestling with it. And then here I am today. I'm a little, different place than you are, but that's what keeps me engaged. It's like, wow, it's like, and it works. It does increase. I'm a lot happier than I was then because of understanding that I can get how I define happiness anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to ask. Always ask. You have to. You don't stop. Just, I had a lot more to do. That's always how I do. But so lastly, just saying this training yourself. Here's a little bit a different way of talking about what I was just talking about. We have to train the mind. That's what comes down to it. The mind is out of whack. It's not very disciplined. It's not very controlled. It's like a tool. We don't really have very. We're not really. So these three things we need to develop over time. So when we have appropriate discipline, the mind is more in control. Okay? Sounds weird. So that's why when you people a lot of times, before they know anything about Buddhism, they always think of monks, right? And it's austere. And the reason that's just an image, but is because, yes, discipline is important, but you got to mean the right thing by discipline. Okay. So is it a discipline to not kill things? Yeah. But we not kill things because it helps the mind. So all the discipline that you'll find, different formulas, different codes, is only so the mind becomes more contained. So another rule is don't become intoxicated. Well, there's nothing wrong with intoxicants. But try being into getting high and then training your mind. Sorry. My older son once asked me, this was years ago, and he's like 16, 15, and he said, Dad, why don't you get stoned anymore? I guess he was starting to experiment. And it was really clear to me. It's like, because it doesn't help. It doesn't make me feel, it makes me feel the same as I did before, but that feeling is not as good a feeling as it was then. Because now I can feel better sometimes. And then, so it's like, it brings me down. I don't like saying it that way, but it's kind of, I can't focus. So if I were to do it, then I can't meditate for 3 days or something. My mind, now I'm not very advanced. That's probably, if someone else can, advanced meditator doesn't affect them at all, maybe. I can't say. But for me, it does. So that's what discipline means. Okay? It helps your mind stay clearer. And people get very attached to discipline, so you got to be careful. Right? You got to be careful, this discipline. But, you become a little bit more arrogant about it. Then transforming the mind, in Tibetan, the word for meditation is gom, which actually, I want you to remember this word. Because if you think about it, what do people normally think meditation means? Tell me what a synonym for meditation would be. Relaxing, yeah. Yeah. Awareness. What else? Huh? Focus. So you have friends, everyone else said, oh, he's meditating right now. It means many different things to be. So Sleeping. Yeah. Me. That's my meditation mostly. So now we get a little more discipline about what we really mean in the Buddhist tradition. Technically speaking, is the word in Tibetan translates as to become familiar. I love that. So if you're sitting cross-legged for 4 hours and staying focused or relaxing, and you're not becoming familiar, you're not meditating according to our tradition. What that means, now, you have to develop focus to become familiar. You have to develop awareness to become familiar. But the goal is not focus, the goal is not awareness, the goal is not relaxation. The goal is to sharpen the mind so you can be more and more familiar with what we're talking about. You would then use it, because we want to directly perceive impermanence. We want to directly perceive interdependence. We want to directly perceive parts, dependent arising. We want those perceptions. Now, once you get the perception, we want to focus on it and deepen it until we become awakened. You need focus for that. You need awareness for that. Okay? You need some relaxation. You need those things. But so often it's taught now that those are the goal. Okay? So those are not the goal at all. They're the tools. That's what's gotten all mixed up in this modern culture of ours. And that's the whole mindfulness movement. If you look at it, it's mostly just to become aware. Not bad, but it's not what we call meditation. Unless you're using it to become familiar with it. Familiar with what? Familiar with reality. That's the main thing. Familiar with how your mind works. Okay? You can become familiar with a lot of things. Compassion, wisdom, interdependence, and there's a lot of things. but it's about becoming familiar with how reality. Again, the last one's wisdom, and wisdom we talked about tonight. That's what we were talking about. Wisdom is seeing things as they really are. Okay, I think that's it. 9:02. Oh, I have a lot more. You can't believe. I shouldn't have worked so hard at this. I need all those. Any last questions? I'm happy to answer. Try to answer, I should say.
So it was a little bit confusing to me because you were saying to become familiar with, but then you said many different things.
Yeah.
So
Because you can
at
choose.
the highest level, would it be to become familiar with your own mind? Or to become familiar
Yes. I don't know if the highest level, that's one of the highest levels. There's a few highest levels because the highest level is, yes. Well, see, for example, we talk about becoming familiar with the reality. That's the highest, but you have to apply that familiarity with how your mind exists. So now you have an understanding of reality. Then you take that and go, okay, so how does my mind exist? Okay, that's primary. But yeah, but there's other things you can apply that view of reality to. Like you could apply it to how do objects exist. That's very important too, because everything in the world is either object and subject, right? So you have to kind of apply it to both. Does that make sense? Okay. It's like to know something. To become familiar means to know it and integrate it. That's the other thing. Not just knowing, but it integrates. It becomes integrated with your being. Lama Zopa doesn't have to become familiar with emptiness. It's integrated. He doesn't have to become familiar with compassion. Do you know? It's just like we don't have to become familiar with selfishness. We're just selfish. When I say so, I'm using it in the very subtle sense. We do everything for this self. Even helping others usually for ourselves. Make ourselves feel good. But when you perceive perceive directly how the self exists and exists differently than this, then you can't do anything for this self anymore. It's just a natural thing. It's not like thought about, contrived. Lama Zopa doesn't ever think about helping others. He just doesn't have a self to help himself. He doesn't have that egocentricity anymore. So it's just like we have natural egocentricity. He has natural other centricity, not thought about. It's just it's like exactly the same thing, similar, not the same, as when a mother just quickly protects a child. Like something comes to child's, getting too close to the road. It just naturally, or we all do that, right? That's what he does. You don't think about, I have to protect my child because you don't think that. But for him, it's exactly the same, and like the Dalai Lama is exactly the same, but much deeper. So we didn't even talk about the compassion side of things. That was coming. Sorry. Okay. So thank you, and enjoy your life. I was going to say your evening, but it's already done. And also one thing, it's an important thing. So some of us, remember about those imprints we talked about? So this imprints, we made a lot of imprints in 4 nights of talking, or 1 night. So you can just think about, just like if you were going to medical school, you dedicate, your time medical school, a lot of suffering, a lot of hard, because you want to go and help people later. So the same thing, you can think about these imprints. You can dedicate them or generate some energy. Then in the future they ripen in a way that's not just like through entertaining class, but actually helps our mind stream become more clear and awaken, and then we can help others for the same thing. So it's very good to think like that. It can have some effect. Okay? That's a little bit faith-oriented, but maybe it works. Okay? Okay, thanks. It was nice spending time with all of you. Thank you. Thank you. No. That's one right there. You just asked one. You mean you want to ask 2? Yes. Yes, what?
I had actually thought of it before, imprints.
Yes.
Do you only make imprints in this lifetime?
No. You make them. Well, no. As long as you have a mind, you make imprints. Of course. You make them throughout your entire existence, even if,
But you're still paying on the old imprints. The old
Well, most of what we
imprints are still there.
experience is all old imprints. Even these imprints we're experiencing now were most likely not even created in this lifetime.
Okay.
That's how it's taught. I don't understand that, but that's how it's taught.
But was the karma ripens, then the imprint leaves, right?
Then it's done.
Okay.
So right now we're having imprints ripen. Those are finished. They'll never ripen again. They'll never come up again. That's why it seems obvious. You never have the same experience twice, right?
Yeah, you don't.
Which is good and bad.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.